Shavua Tov and good morning. Welcome to our weekly Sunday morning Parsha class, Parsha Pinchas. What page are we?
10:41 and
You have the good Chumash. We're on 1040, 1041, beginning of the Parsha of Pinchas. So we continue with the story as we are at the end of the 40 years, getting ready to enter the land of Israel. And we have a very interesting incident that happens in this week's parsha. I think it's a powerful lesson of teaches us about being honest and what bribery could cause a person. And it's also one of those it's like one of those beautiful stories, like a warm feeling when you read the story of the love that people had for the land of Israel. But before we get to that, just a little overview of the parsha. So the parsha continues exactly where we left off at the end of last week's parsha. There's an incident in last week's parsha, right at the end, where the Jewish people sin with the daughters of Moab. Right? So we have the story of Bilam, the prophet, who curses the Jewish people, and or is hired to curse the Jewish people, but instead of curses, he blesses them. And it seems like it was unsuccessful. This whole endeavor, this whole idea of bringing someone to curse and bring down some negative spiritual energy was not successful. However, unfortunately, something was successful, and that was he gave advice. And the advice that he gave to Balak, he said, listen, at the end of the day, we know this God, and this God of the Jewish people hates when the Jewish people sin. So if you cause them to sin, that's something you have going for you. And then unfortunately, that's what they did. And they brought the daughters of Moab to entice the Jewish people together with the Pa'or, with the idol Pa'or, and the Jewish people fell for it. And many, many Jewish people sinned with these girls, the Moabite girls, and they've also, so there was adultery and idolatry. They also served the idols. And because of this, many people died. There was a plague that I believe 24,000 Jewish people died. And there was also other ways how the judges were killing people who were sinning. And there was like 166,000. Thousands of people were dying. And at the center of all this, there was one of the leaders, the prince of Shimon, the leaders of the Jewish people, was also sinning with a daughter of Midian, Kazbi Basur, a Midianite girl, and it was done in a very public manner. And the story came to Moshe, and the Jewish people said, Moshe, what do we do over here? What do we do? And at that moment, Moshe had a blank. He wasn't sure what to do. He forgot what the halacha is. How do we deal with this? And his student Pinchas says, Rabbi, didn't you teach us that if this happens, a zealot is allowed to go and kill the person? And Moshe says, you're right. That is what we taught. And Pinchas went and killed this Zimri. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Killed Zimri with Kazbi, and right then and there, the plague subsided, and no more Jews died after that. And then this week's parsha continues with the reward that Hashem gave to Pinchas, because Pinchas, who was the grandson of Aaron, for technical reasons, seemingly, he was not considered a Kohen. Why was that? Because we know that Aaron, no, his father, he was a son, paternal. He was a son's son. Aaron's son
was
was
born before. He was born before.
Oh, he was born before, exactly. So, but basically, when Aaron received this priesthood, the kahuna, it was for him and his descendants, but it was for him, his children, and the further descendants who will be born after that. So the grandchildren who were alive at the time were not considered a Kohen for whatever reason. So Pinchas, who was alive at the time, he was a grandson. He was not considered a Kohen. But because of this incident, he got that reward, and now he and his children, his descendants, became Kohanim. So after this incident, there's a terrible plague. So what happens is God again chooses to count the Jewish people. Another census. Right after the plague, it's also right before Moshe dies, and God, when Moshe began, we left Egypt, they counted. Now Moshe is about to die, they count again. We know that counting in general shows a love, how Hashem cherishes the Jewish people. So a big part of the parsha is the census, counting the Jewish people. And then after that, we speak briefly about dividing the land of Israel, even though later in, I believe in Deuteronomy, we go this in greater detail. But here we talk about the dividing the land. And then we have the story of the complaint of the daughters of Slavchad, which we'll get back to momentarily. Then we have the rest of the parsha. We speak about Moshe. He knows he's about to die. Well, we need a new Moshe. What's going to be? He speaks to Hashem, and they appoint a successor. They appoint Joshua to be the successor after Moshe dies. Then the last section of the parsha, we talk about the various offerings that were brought on a daily basis and on a weekly basis on Shabbos and throughout the year on the special Jewish holidays. So that's the overview of the parsha. But I want to read inside a little bit about the story of the daughters of Slavchad. I think it's an amazing story to see how people who have such a love and a passion for something are able to step forward and make a change. So this is the beginning of chapter 27, verse 1. In the Good Chumash, we're on page 1055. And I read as follows. Vatikravna b'noi Slavchad ben Chefer ben Gilad ben Machir ben Menashe. Lemishpachois Menashe ben Yosef. So we have a long line over here of ancestry, right? Who are these daughters of Slavchad? So these are the daughters of Slavchad who were so the father was Slavchad. His father was Chefer, the son of Gilad, the son of Machir, the son of Menashe, who was the son of Joseph. So how many generations is that? You have Joseph, Menashe, Machir, Gilad, Chefer, Slavchad. Then you have these daughters. Okay? And it's interesting to note that they are the grandchildren of Machir, the son of Menashe. Because Machir, the son of Menashe, was already mentioned in the Torah previously. It was the end of the end of Chukas, I believe, 2 weeks ago. I may be getting confused with the different time, but there is a mention of Machir ben Menashe who conquered a piece of land at the outside of on the east side of the Jordan River. So keep that in mind that we have Machir ben Menashe who conquered that land. So it's a little later, actually. You go to page 1093 in verse 39. Head 93, verse 39. It says, "Vayelchu b'nei Mocher ben Menashe." The children of Mocher ben Menashe went to the place called Gilad. Vayelkedua, and they conquered it. Vayoyresh es ha'amoyri asher ba, and they drove out the Amorites who were there, and Moshe gave Gilad to Machir ben Menashe, and he settled over there. So we see that the children of Machir ben Menashe, they actually got an inheritance on the other side of the Jordan River. In fact, we know later in the Parsha, there are 2.5 tribes who actually don't take an inheritance at all in the land of Israel. The tribes of Reuben and Gad, and half of Menashe, they said, listen, we have a lot of cattle. They actually take land on the other side of the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan River. They have more space, they have more. And Moshe agrees to that. They have to go in and first fight with the Jewish people. So half of Menashe's descendants, including Machir's descendants, did not even go into Israel. So take note of that. But here we have the daughters of Slavchad, who are descendants of Machir, the son of Menashe, who are coming with a complaint. What's their complaint? Verse 2. They come and they stand before Moshe and Elazar the priest and all the leaders of the congregation. So notice over here, we're talking about Moshe and Elazar, which means we're already talking about after the death of Aaron. So we're literally at the end of the 40 years, Aaron already died, and we are speaking about the daughters of Slavchad speaking to Moshe and Elazar. And what do they say? Verse 3. Avinu meis b'midbar. Our father died in the desert, meaning Slavchad died in the desert. He was not part of the congregation. He was not part of the group who rebelled against God. With the group, with the assembly of Korah. He died of his own sin. And he did not have any sons. There were 5 daughters, no sons. And why did our father die? Don't make a mistake. It wasn't because of Korah. He died from his own sin. What was his sin? Various opinions. What was the sin? Some say there was an incident earlier on, right after God gave us the mitzvah of Shabbos, that there was one person who decided to collect twigs of Shabbos.
Sticks. Yeah.
Sticks.
Yeah.
Which is forbidden on Shabbos.
Shabbos. That was the
right. And he was killed. Why did he do it? It's understood that he did it for good reasons. He did it to show people that this you got to take this seriously. But either way, he was called the Mokoshesh Eitzim, the twig collector. Perhaps that was Slavchad. We don't know the name, but maybe that was him.
You're saying he did that intentionally?
It was wrong, meaning he got punished for it, but he did it because he wanted to show the people that God means business, right? If God gave us Shabbos, we got to keep Shabbos. That was one opinion. Another opinion says that if you remember the story of the spies, when they came back and they complained, and Hashem says, you know what, you're complaining, I'll give it to you. For 40 years, we're going to wander in the desert, and all of these, the older generation are going to die, right? And you're not going to go into Israel. And suddenly the Jewish people had to change of hearts. Said, oh, I'm so sorry. They started crying. And a group of the Jews decided, you know what, we're going to go now. We made a mistake. We're going to fight them.
And they all died.
And Moshe told them, listen, now it's too late. Fighting them is only going to work if Hashem is on your side. You blew it. I'm sorry. Now you got to wait. Don't go. And they said, we're going anyways. We're going anyways. And they went up.
And they died.
Unfortunately, they all died. So Tzlavchad might have been from that group. So he died. So either which way, the daughters say, listen, he died from his personal sin, whether it was because of Shabbos, whether it was because he was fighting without side. And and he did not have any sons. So what's the problem? What's the issue? So what do they say in verse 4? Lama yigara shemavinu mitoich mishpachtoi. Why should our father's name be missed out from the family? Ki ein lo ben, he has no son. Tnalanu achuza v'soich achrei avinu. Give us a portion along with our father's brothers. What was their complaint? Right? 5 daughters coming to the courthouse, coming to Moshe and Elazar, lining up 5 girls. What do you want? How could I help? Father died, no sons. Why should we lose out? What's their question? The question is like this. They're about to go into Israel. And every tribe received a portion of the land. Till today, you go to Israel, you look at a map, different parts of Israel have different names, right? You could go to Gush Dan, today in Israel, the center, I think like Tel Aviv area, is called Gush Dan, like the area of Dan. Dan is one of the tribes, right? That's where section he got. Go a little south, you have Judah, right? Judah and Samaria, right? What Judah and Samaria? Judah was the tribe of Judah. That was the area that they lived. And you have Benjamin, you have whatever, all the tribes. 9.5 tribes had portions in the land, and the way it was divided, it was that every family got a portion, and every family within this tribe got a portion, and because 2.5 got on the other side of the thing. Now, and then there's the Levites. The Levites, they didn't get a section to live, but they lived around. Yeah, there's different cities that they were dedicated. So every tribe got a section. Within the section, every family got a piece of land, and it went to their children. And how did it go? So the son would get it, then whoever got married into the family got their husband's portion, and they pass it on to their children. Which is, by the way, a fascinating thing. Just stop there for a moment. How the Torah gave, even from a very, from an economical standpoint, the financial stability that everyone had. Every family owned land. They owned a piece of land, and and the way it worked is that even if they sold the land, it was only a temporary sale, because every year, every 50 years, by the Jubilee, by the Yovel, it would go back to the original owners. In other words, every family possessed land. So there's certain like financial stability that we had in Israel. There's no such thing as being homeless, unless people sold their land and then they have 50 years to be homeless. But the point is, families always owned property. Well, today who? Are saying, do we own our own land? He's saying,
they have.
I mean,
Whether they have to, for every 50 years, they have to purchase it.
so Jubilee doesn't really apply. He's saying modern Israel. You're asking, what are you asking? Modern Israel doesn't follow these land. And on the contrary, now it's like the opposite. I'm not like an expert in the laws of property laws in Israel, but my understanding is that it's actually very difficult to own land in Israel. Today, the government owns everything, and like in order to get land from the government, it's like I think it's only on lease. Like anytime you buy land in Israel, you're basically leasing it from the government. Like no one really owns property in Israel. Again, I'm not an expert at all, but that's my understanding in modern Israel. Yeah, is that the same way?
In the 70s, they had a law in Israel that if you could build a roof on land that wasn't possessed, then you owned it. That was yours.
In Israel?
I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Either way, so what's the problem? The problem is, well, what happens if someone only has daughters? So now what? So the daughters get married, and they take a portion with their husbands' families. So their father kind of loses out. What happens to his portion? Now, Slavchad already died in the desert. But what they're saying is that the land of Israel was already given to the Jews who left Egypt. Mm-hmm. So even though he technically is not going into the land of Israel, but he already received a portion. So it's really our portion. But now that he has no sons, that's going to get lost. The name of our father will get lost. We also want a portion of the land. Some people say, so much so, the daughters of Tzlavchad, if he was from the ones who the twig collector, or the one that went up, that means that he already died 40 years earlier. So he died 40 years earlier. So these girls were at least 40 years old, right? They're probably, they had 5 girls, right? So many of them were probably 50, 60 years old.
Our age, Susan.
I didn't say that they're old. I didn't say they're old. I said 50 years old. Young 50-year-olds. Young 60-year-olds. Little kids. My only question is, why were they not married? For so many years. They weren't married.
Bad luck.
Maybe not.
Say, who wants to marry someone whose father died, and but one of the explanations given is because of their love for the land, they wanted to be able to receive a portion for their father, so they didn't get married. Because if they would have got married, then they was received with their spouse, with their husband's family. So this is how great their love for the land was. And even take us a step further, as we just mentioned, they were the descendants of Machir ben Menashe. Machir ben Menashe, his family seemingly was from the half of his tribe who didn't even receive a piece of land in Israel. They were like, we're happy with a piece of land on the other side of the Jordan River. We have so much cattle, so much more space, so much more grass, so much more fields, and Moshe agreed to it. So they could have legitimately taken land outside of Israel. But they said, no, we want a piece of land in Israel for our father's name. Half the tribe. So it was Gad and Reuven. I believe it's the next week's Parsha. Gad and Reuven, those 2 tribes, together with half of Menashe. But which half? The guy says, the entire tractate, the entire set of Talmud, right? It's like 60 volumes. And the guy says, I know, I've studied half of the entire Talmud. Wow, so impressive. Half of the Talmud, that's a lot. Which half? Says, whichever one you test me on, it's the other half. So half of Menashe took a piece of land on the other side, but which half, right? So I guess maybe they have a choice. And they said, no, we want to go with the half that's going into Israel. They loved Israel. And that's like, it warms your heart when you read this, like, you know what? There was a certain law, halacha, that tells us that it goes by, the son's family. They could have went along with it. They could have taken a piece of land outside of Israel, but they said, no, we're going to stand up for it. We're going to go to Moshe. We're going to ask. We're going to demand. We're going to lobby. And what does Moshe say? Verse 5. Vayakriv Moshe es mishpatan lifnei Hashem. Moshe doesn't have an answer. He says, you know what I have to do? Let me speak to God. I'll pass on your question to God. And God answers, yes, they are correct. They have a point. And he gives a new mitzvah, a new halacha, that whenever there's no daughters, whenever there's no sons, it goes to the daughter's family. And when there's no daughters, it goes to the brother, right? And it continues teaching a new halacha, a new law that was not taught before. It's a beautiful ending to the story. And later they all got married, right? This is later they all got married, and they married people from their own tribe. Because if they would have married people from outside the tribe, then it would have been very confusing. Because if they're getting their father's piece of land, and then they marry someone from a different tribe, so then their children suddenly inherit. So the tribal land goes on to a different tribe, right? So therefore, to keep things organized. So that's the law. Anytime anyone's son dies without sons, and their daughters take a piece of land for their father, they have to marry within the same tribe. Later on, yeah. Later on, the people of Menashe came to complain. So that's not fair. But losing out. Looks like Hashem made this what's it called, addendum. He added this little detail to this. Okay. But here's interesting. Two interesting points. First of all, Moshe knew the entire Torah, right? In fact, we say in our prayer, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. The Torah is named for Moshe. Moshe wasn't just another guy, a smart rabbi that knew a lot. I mean, the Torah and Moshe are one. We don't separate the two. He heard everything directly for 40 days and 40 nights, like an angel on the mountain, just studying Torah directly from God. I mean, he wasn't as King David writes in Psalms, Ish hu Elokim. He was a man of God. He was half man, half God. I mean, he wasn't a normal human being, right? He was a very special. I mean, this is not like just a rocket science type of scenario, right? It happens. People die without sons. Moshe couldn't figure this out on his own. Moshe didn't know on his own. He doesn't know, and he has to ask God. And interestingly, this comes to in a continuation to last week's parsha, where something very similar happens with the story of Zimri, like we mentioned previously, and also they came to Moshe, and Moshe says, I don't know, I'm lost, I'm not sure what to do," and then someone had to remind him. So kind of 2 times in a row that he forgot, or he didn't know what to say.
No, once but twice.
But twice. What is he, an old man? He's starting to forget things.
No, he was thoughtful, didn't want to make a spur of the moment decision.
I understand that. But
Like when you hit the
right,
rock,
right. But it's a good point. But what I would argue is that it's okay to say, let me think about it. I'll let you know. I mean, Moshe would stand every day from morning to night answering people's questions. The Torah doesn't mention what the questions were. But there were many questions that came to Moshe's desk. And I'm sure Moshe didn't always spit out an answer. Sometimes he would think about it. When I call, sometimes we have questions in Jewish law. I call my rabbis, right? And some rabbis are like, as you're finishing the question, they're ready to give you an answer. I don't like to call those guys. It's like, come on, listen to me, hear me out, right? Think about it, right? Sometimes it's a question of, it has to be thought, So sometimes rabbis say, let me think about it, I'll call you back. Well, those are the rabbis I'd like to talk to. And the ones that actually call back, not the ones that forget about you. And they call back, I looked into it, I thought about it, maybe asked some more details, right? We have a discussion. Okay, right? I'm sure Moshe was the same way. Spit out an answer, or maybe sometimes he thought about it. He discussed it, he asked questions. But the Torah doesn't mention it because that was Moshe's job. That's what he did. He taught Torah. So it could be assumption that question comes, let me think about it. I'll give you an answer. But the Torah seemingly emphasizes that he wasn't able to answer on his own. And the Torah says later when he died, right? There's a short eulogy for Moshe. And he says Moshe was sharp and healthy and strong until the day he died. So his mind was there. But for some reason, Hashem orchestrated in a way where he should not know this answer on his own. There are numerous answers given to this. And one of them is that there's a common denominator between these two cases. The case of Zimri, last week's Parsha, and this story with the daughters of Slavchot. And that is, there was a bias over here. A bias. There was a subtle bribery to Moshe. What was that? Last week's Parsha, there's the unwritten story that we are told through the oral tradition was that the story of Zimri wasn't just that he sinned with the daughter of Midian. There was a conversation. He went to Moshe and he challenged Moshe. And he said, Moshe, am I allowed to live with her? He said, no. He says, well, if she's a daughter of Midian and you tell me it's forbidden, Who allowed you to marry your wife, Tzipporah, who was a Midianite girl, the daughter of Yisrael? Now, obviously, it was before the giving of the Torah. It's a whole different story. But he challenged Moshe personally. So now already, Moshe personally is involved over here. He dragged Moshe into the story. What did the daughters of Slavchat say over here? Our father died in the desert. You know who he was? They didn't say who he was. They say who he wasn't. He wasn't. Who wasn't he? A member of the spies, a member of Korach. Now, if they would have said the spies, it's one thing. But what was Korach's rebellion against? Moshe personally. Wasn't against God. Wasn't like the spies who didn't believe that God could take them into Israel. Wasn't against anyone else who was doing a sin against God. Here, Korach was challenging Moshe himself. Nepotism, you're doing things on your own. What makes you greater than everyone else? So once they mentioned our father, he wasn't part of Korach's rebellion. He had a different sin. Even just mentioning that, Moshe feels, oh, okay, so Tzlavcha's on my side. Okay, right? That itself disqualified Moshe from judging this case because he already has a bias. It's already a form of bribery. And this teaches us, by the way, how important it is to be completely objective for a rabbi, for a judge. Even the slightest form of bias, of bribery, already could change. In other words, like this, we're not talking about, God forbid, to say that Moshe was going to actually change his decision or the verdict because of this. He was an honest man. But ultimately, the way our minds work, that we're always thinking about self, consciously, subconsciously. And the subconscious mind is very, very powerful. And there are things that we do on a daily basis because of our subconscious mind. And we don't even know why we're doing it, but we just do it because that's what our mind is telling us to do. And we convince ourselves that this is right. In other words, like this, when there's a certain gray area, you can see things, but you can see both sides of the coin. And it's very important to really think it through and to kind of come to a conclusion. But both sides have a very strong argument. So which side are you going to kind of adopt? It's really about how you think about it that day. But if there's one thing slightly pulling you to one side, it's not completely objective. They say this amazing story with one of the greatest halachic authorities. His name was Rabbi Yehoshua Katz. He lived in Poland 300 years ago. And he wrote extensively on Jewish law. He wrote a commentary on the Code of Jewish Law, on the Shulchan Aruch. And he wrote a lot about Jewish civil law from the Torah. His commentaries today are printed as a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, the open Code of Jewish Law in the Hebrew. You have the Drisha, the Prisha, his commentary, very prominent rabbi. He also wrote a book called Me'iras Einayim on Jewish law. Now, he once had a personal issue with someone in his community, a monetary issue, where he felt he was not obligated to pay, and the other person thought that he did have to pay him. And they couldn't come to an agreement. So they decided, okay, we'll go to the rabbi. We'll work it out by the rabbi. But this other man told this rabbi, said, listen, you're a very prestigious rabbi. I don't think it's fair for me to go to the local rabbi, me and you, because they're obviously going to take your side. If you're going to say something, of course, it's a great rabbi saying it, this little, right? I don't think it's even. I don't think it's fair. I think we have to go to a different rabbi. And Rabbi Yeshua Katz says, you know what? That's a fair argument. You know what? Let's travel to a different city where they don't recognize me. You know, today everyone knows everyone from around the world. But back in the day, if you weren't a local person, you may have heard of the name, but you haven't seen him. You don't know how he looks. There's no pictures. So let's go to a different city, to a different rabbi, someone who doesn't know me, and then we'll have a fair trial or a fair judgment. So okay, let's do that. So they travel a few hours to the nearby town. They go to that rabbi. They say, we have coming from a different city, but we have this argument. We want you to help us come to understanding and what to do. And so each one tells their side of the story. And the rabbi ends up siding with the other guy, not with this great Rabbi Katz. So Rabbi Katz gets a little surprised. And he says, Heichon dantuni, tell me where you get this from. Like, show me where in halakha you see this, that I'm wrong and he's right. So he says, well, recently there's been published a new book on halakha called the Me'iras Einayim. In other words, quoting this rabbi's own works. And over there, he quotes a very, very similar incident. And this is how he writes about it. And he realizes, yeah, that's me. I wrote this, but because I'm now personally involved, I didn't have a clear mind. Not to say he's not an honest person, but because he has a bias, therefore he sees things differently. That's how important that has to be. This area comes up, obviously many areas, you go into a rabbi that, it's a friend of yours, your community or something. You have to be careful with these things, even an honest rabbi. This thing comes up also a lot with Jewish, when it comes to kosher, right? So you have a rabbi giving a kosher certification. Now, kosher certification, it's not so easy, not so simple. I'm not so involved, but I'm a little involved in giving kosher certifications. There's a lot of pressure involved because something goes wrong, and so it's a lot of money involved, right? So, if you're giving a certification on a restaurant, right? And there was an issue with something, and sometimes you have to say, you know what, got to close the restaurant for a day, or all this food has to be thrown out because we don't know whatever issue came up, right? And sometimes there's pressure. I don't know, but maybe and you have to stand strong, right? Or if it's talking about mass production, you go into one of these big plants, and you come in, and there's a question. Well, this whole line has to be thrown out. You got to, or something. We got to pull our certification. I'm not happy with things that are going. We got to pull the certification. You got to make major changes. And there's some, and there's pressure, and you have to be strong. Now, what happens if the rabbi gets paid personally every single time he goes in there? Right? So how honest are they going to be? No, I'm not questioning any rabbis because rabbis, I'm assuming they're all honest. But a lot of these kosher certifications and agencies like to set up their system in a way where the rabbi who's going in doesn't gain personally from whether they have the certification or not. For example, if someone's on a salary, I'm on a salary, right? The OU pays me for my time, no matter if I'm going to this plant or that plant, right? If this one loses their certification, I don't lose from it, right? So it's very easy to be honest and say, these are the problems, this has to be fixed, things like that. I mean, there's a whole system in place. What happens if you go to a place and they say, you know what, Rabbi, we love you so much. Here, take all this free food, right? Here, take all. I mean, right now already the rabbi is friends with the owners and friends, and they gain a lot from this. So now they see a problem. Should I say something, or should I say, whatever, it's probably fine. Find the reasons why it's okay, or how honest am I going to be? These are all very subtle, right? Because I'm not saying that we see something that's non-kosher, we're going to say it's kosher, but there's the gray areas and ways you can kind of get around it, and how honest are we going to be? These are really questions we have to take into account. And over here we see that these two cases where Moshe has certain, it became a little personal, not because of Moshe, because what was mentioned. Moshe, who allowed you the daughter of Yisro, a Midianite woman, Zipporah. Moshe, my father was not, was your friend. He wasn't from Korah. He didn't rebel against you. Oh, now already Moshe is put in the spot where, what? Maybe it's better if someone else should deal with this. So that's one very important lesson. But also, another beautiful thing about this story And this is very much connected to the time that we're about to enter in this week. Because beginning on Tuesday, this week Tuesday, is the 17th on the Jewish calendar. It's the 17th of Tammuz. And 17th of Tammuz is an important day in Jewish history. We begin a 3-week period of mourning, of sadness, because it was a time when the Romans breached the walls of Jerusalem, and which led eventually to the destruction of the temple. The Babylonian Talmud talks about this in regards to the second temple, roughly the year 67, 69, different accounts of history, when the Romans came and destroyed the temple on the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, as we know. And about 3 weeks previously, they breached the walls. They were fighting. The Jewish people were trying to hold up. And unfortunately, didn't last, and it took them about 3 weeks to get to the Temple Mount and to eventually destroy the temple. So the walls were breached on the 17th of Tammuz, and other things that happened as well. Moshe broke the tablets on the 17th of Tammuz. During the siege, they stopped bringing sacrifices on the 17th of Tammuz. There are 5 different things that happened on the 17th of Tammuz. The Jerusalem Talmud says that actually the first temple that was destroyed by the Babylonians also was on an exact same date. It was destroyed on the 9th of Av, and 3 weeks earlier, on the 17th of Tammuz, the walls of Jerusalem were breached. So for 3 weeks, we have some mourning. We don't take haircuts. We don't listen to live music. We don't get married. Not too late. You got today and tomorrow. Do I think I need it? You think I need a haircut? You're planning on getting married this week? No. If you plan to get married before Tuesday. So it's a time, really, thinking about the destruction of the temple. It's not just a time to be sad and to mourn, but it's really a time to demand. What are we demanding? That this all ends. Exile ends. Mashiach comes. We rebuild the third temple. Get out of all of our trouble, all of our exile, and that's what it's really about. It's not just about mourning the past, but it's about thinking about the future. And that's what I say. It warms the heart when you read a story like the daughter of the Slavkas, where they don't just go with status quo. We had a similar incident a few weeks ago, also the Parsha B'Halecha, with people who were not able to bring the Paschal lamb because they were impure. Same thing happens over there. They use the same language. Lama nigara. Why should we lose out? Exact same words. Why should we lose out the opportunity to bring the sacrifice, to bring the Paschal lamb, to serve God? Right? When we're in school and our parents tell us we have to miss school today, unfortunately, we have to go on a trip. What do we say? Yay, I'm so happy. Who's complaining? Who's sad, right? We had this family over here. I think I said this before, who some part of our community who we asked, they had children that were the age of our Sunday Hebrew school. They weren't in the Jewish school. So we say, you know what, in the Jewish school during the week. Why don't you send them to our Hebrew school on Sunday? And they said, listen, we already gave up our Shabbos for Judaism. Our Sundays are too holy for this. Our Sundays we go fishing, we go family trips. We can't give this up. So we said, listen, you know what? How about this? You don't go every single Sunday. Sunday that's raining or whatever. So whenever you're in town, send your kids. And whenever you want to take them out, that's permission, no problem. Just take them out. At least some of the weeks they'll come and they'll have some type of Jewish education. He said, okay. He agreed. So he started sending his kids, and they would leave. The beginning they would leave quite often. And then one day he comes to us and says, we had this fishing trip planned for today. And we told our kids about it. And they said, no, we want to go to Hebrew school. He said, not in a million years have I ever imagined that if I had give my child the choice to go to Hebrew school today or go fishing, they'll say, no, we want to go to Hebrew school. So when I was growing up, any opportunity I was able to get out of religious school, I would jump on it.
You get out of school.
To get out of school, right? You know, we do it because we have to, but you know, I have permission to skip. But these weren't these people, you know, these people that had the opportunity. They could have said, you know what, we're not obligated to do this mitzvah, and therefore I could say, well, we'll take it, no problem. We'll sleep in today, so we'll miss it. What's the big deal? Then no, lama nigara. Why do we lose out? We want to be a part of this. We want to be involved. We want to do this mitzvah. We want to do the Paschal Lamb. The Da'ados Slavcha said the same thing. Lama nigara. We know what the law is, but we're not happy with it. We're not happy. We want to be part of it. We could have taken a piece of land on the other side of the Jordan with our family and have more space. We could play football. We could play soccer. We could run around. We could have a great time. No, we want to be in Israel. We want to have our Father's name. We want it. We love it. Lama nigara. We're not looking for excuses to get out. We want to be a part of it. And that's what Moshe loved. And Hashem loved that. And that brought this new halacha, new piece of the Torah that we haven't had before, just because of them. And that teaches us also as well. We could say, status quo, listen, we're in this is the way it's been for so many years. This is life. We got used to it. We're living out here in beautiful Metairie, beautiful Philadelphia, having a great time. We have a house, we have a family, we have our synagogue, we have our Chabad house. We love it, it's great. Everything is good. But Hashem tells us, I want you to complain. What should you complain about? You shouldn't complain about the soup's too hot or the soup's too cold. We shouldn't complain that our flights were canceled. We shouldn't complain that there's too much flooding. We shouldn't complain that this is hurting and that's hurting. That's not what we should be complaining about. Complain that I want more Judaism. I want more God in my life. I want Mashiach to come. This is what we should be complaining about. I want more and I want more and I want more. And Hashem says, if you stand up and you don't say, this is what Hashem gave me and I'm just taking it. In material things, that's what we should say. But in spiritual things, we should say, no, I want more and more and more. And then Hashem says, you know what? We'll give it to you. And may Hashem give it to us. And we should merit that we shouldn't have to fast this Tuesday on the 17th of Tammuz. We shouldn't have to fast on the Tisha B'Av this year. We should be celebrating in the third temple and with Mashiach, and maybe today. So l'chaim to that. And I also want to mention, I wanted to mention at the beginning of the class that today's study was in merit of my nephew, Menachem ben Nechamadina, who needs a miraculous recovery for Shlema. May it be today. L'chaim. Thank you for joining us. Have a Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.